The goal of public service is service. The goal of private sector is profitability or growth or whatever you want to call it. But there's a difference between the goals of these two. Just because you're a successful businessman doesn't make you a successful politician. And once you step back and you see like, okay, there's many political parties that get banned before me, and there's politicians who are banned for 10 years, I don't have to take this personally. It becomes a lot lighter, personally.
I see.
But professionally, it increases the density of your calling, that this is a systematic issue, that if I don't stand up for it, it's going to happen to my daughter's generation and my granddaughter's generation. If there's enough mandate, if there's enough calling from the people that they want me to govern and they want me to run again, whatever legal procedure that is done to me can be reversed. Pathway to power is always there, as long as you still have that fire in you and people give you the mandate. So it's up to you whether you find your North Star, improve the skills in order to have a plan in order to get there.
Hello and welcome to APARC Briefing. My name is Kiyoteru Tsutsui. I'm the director of Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center here at Stanford University. I'm your host for APARC Briefing, and today I am delighted and honored to have a special guest, the democracy leader, reformist leader, and democracy champion of the country of Thailand, Pita Limjaroenrat. Welcome, Pita.
The honor is mine. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. We're recording this right after APARC Southeast Asia program session, fireside chat with Pita, which also will be released. So those of you who are interested in that content, please tune in to that one. We talked about his political career. As many of you know, he was the leader of the Thailand's Move Forward party.
Correct.
And in May 2023, he won the election, a stunning victory in the general election on a platform of progressive change. The party won 151 seats.
Exactly.
And the most of any party in the election. He was poised to be appointed Prime Minister, and then court injunction came, and then his path to prime ministership was blocked. And that story we discussed quite a bit in that APARC Southeast Asia program session. So but we can recount that a little bit here, just to give the audience of this APARC briefing more background. He then came back to Harvard Kennedy School to be a senior democracy fellow, and where he still is. And he went back to campaign in the February 2026 election. He's been, because of the 2023 fallout, he's been banned from running for office. For at least 10 years, hopefully.
So now it's only 8 years left.
Only 8 years left. But he was still able to campaign for his party
as a civic duty.
Civic duty. And the party now is named the People's Party, and he campaigned. The election didn't quite go in his size way, and there were a lot of issues, and we discussed that also in the Southeast Asia program fireside chat. Here today, I would like to ask him more about the sort of personal journey that he has taken to be where he is in terms of his charismatic leadership skills. He's one probably the most popular politician in Thailand, and he has great following, which showed in the other room where we hosted him for the fireside chat. He wrote his memoir, The Almost Prime Minister, which is about to come out in English in September, you said?
September, with the Penguin.
So the story is there, but I want to zoom into his personal journey and what made Pita who he is today. So welcome again to APARC Briefing.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with your upbringing, education in particular. Were you always a leadership type? You were head of a school student council and those kinds of positions, or are you more of a bookworm type? Are you more jock type? What type of childhood did you have?
Jacks of all trades.
Jacks of all trades. Good, good.
But yes, I like to step forward in sports.
Okay.
When I was young, I played basketball, badminton, and squash, and I was very competitive as a young person. Did okay in school. Not so much when I was in Bangkok, but I moved to Hamilton, New Zealand, turning from a boy to a man, and it was all boys Catholic school where we bond very fast, and it developed. It was a very strong part of who I become. That experience. Educational wise, sport wise, music wise, I was always very hard on myself to really drive results. Yes, I play a little bit of guitar back in the days. So I think all of that kind of gave me a couple of DNAs, a lot of who I am today speaking with you, for example, because I came from a middle class family. So I sort of in the middle, I understand the friends that are from a well-off families. I know a little bit about people who are struggling because I was also in Bangkok. I grew up in New Zealand. I was like in the middle. I understand the international flavor of being around the world as well as the local flavor of talking to farmers in rural areas and things like that. A lot of that came from New Zealand because it's a very agricultural agricultural country where a lot of people in my town, in my area was like that. It became part of me that I was always like more of a consensus in the middle. International, local, mid-age at the age of 46 now. And also, I try to position myself as both public and private guy. So that's why, I finish all my classes at Harvard Kennedy School, where it's the public side, and MIT Sloan, which is the private side. So that became who I am. And that's how I position myself as a differentiated leader in 2023. Someone who understands international markets and rural areas, someone who's middle class, who understands people who are well off and people who are struggling, the mid-aged man who understands people who've come before me and people who've come after me, someone who understands both private side and public side because he prepared myself, because he prepared himself that way. So that was the kind of my unique proposition to the country in the sense, but it was really truly who I was.
So you've been a man of the people. You probably always been very social. When did you develop a sense of like leadership that people follow me? I can actually lead. When did you get that sense? If there was any moment, were you a captain of the team or something like that?
Captain of the team or the leader of the class. Sometimes like teachers would call on me to get something done. I would be the one who organized all the basketball court, and so like teachers would. I think it came because I had a good teacher. Someone who believed in me, someone who assigned me responsibilities, and just because he picked on me, I felt like I had that potential. So mentoring is super important and things like that. But on a public scale, I felt like my calling was becoming stronger in terms of like get into the grind and make change happen in tsunami. When tsunami hit Thailand in 2003, 2004, I was working for a consulting company, management consulting company, Boston Consulting Group. And we had a proposal for the government back in the time, or maybe Tourism Authority, I can't remember exactly, on tourism recovery strategy. And, from a finance guy, investment banking kind of guy, seeing this kind of public leadership, and then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the sense that intellectual curiosity from the business school side was to maximize shareholders' wealth, and that's it. Or stakeholders' wealth, and that's it. But here, when you talk about energy policy, you balance both energy security of the country and the share price maximization as well. So that intellectual curiosity in me made me inclined towards leadership that is more than just leading a team or leading a class, but really to lead in solving difficult problems. I think that's one of my strengths, like intellectual curiosity of trying to get to the bottom of things. Like I wouldn't stop until I get it done and things like that.
I see.
But it changed a bit. Like before, life was about competing, and now life is about completing. Like really be satisfied with who you are and trying to set up a task and try to complete it, rather than compete for success all the time. I guess that's what happens when you're in your 40s, I guess.
That's a great approach, completing rather than competing. I was going to ask you about what sparked your interest in politics, but it sounds like the tsunami moment was when, because you had degrees in MBA and PA, MBA from Sloan School, MIT, and then PA from Harvard Kennedy School.
Right.
So I guess you were...
I was going to come to Stanford, but it was too far. I remember dragging my futon up the apartment, and I was like, okay, that's the end of moving anywhere outside of Boston. I'm not going to keep changing my apartment every year, but at least I'm here. So
lost, but never too late. You can come
never
back
too late.
In a different capacity.
In a different capacity.
So that was when you, and so you were already, but then you were doing MPA, so you were already interested in public service to a certain extent, right? At that
yes,
age.
I knew I wanted to run for public office.
You did?
2005 maybe. So I've been preparing myself for 15, 20 years before I actually run. Like I worked for other leaders, worked for other ministers, and used Harvard as a bridge. Joint degree, correct, but Harvard was the dominant one, because during undergrad I was majoring in finance. So like BBA and MBA is I sort of understand finance, statistics, NPV analysis, political betas, weighted average cost of capital. Those things I understood. So it was spending on like understanding ethics, morality, and how to run for a public office and policy design. Fiscal and monetary policies and things like that. But I try to balance it up so that when I work in the private sector, I understand how governments think. When I'm in the government, I understand what the private sectors need. So those are the things. And also to see the differences between the two as well. It's quite important. It's something that was a takeaway for me. Private sector, just because you're successful in the private sector doesn't mean that you'll be successful in the public sector. The goal of public service is service. The goal of private sector is profitability or growth or whatever you want to call it. But there's a difference between the goals of these two. Just because you're a successful businessman doesn't make you a successful politician, I don't think. Because like I said, the goal of public service is service, and it's not just about making the most out of your buck all the time.
That's a powerful combination to have, right? You have skill sets in both. And I would imagine that it's helpful to understand the sort of business side of things. And eventually, hopefully, you run a country, and then understanding the finance, business, entrepreneurship, those things, especially for Thai economy to get rejuvenated.
I remember like when politicians make policies, but they don't even know what overdraft is. They don't even know how to get a loan out. They don't know what the difference between letter of credit and promissory note. Those common things that small businesses have to deal with all the time, but you are designing policy that you haven't done it yourself. So it's quite important.
Good. And more about your sort of personal resilience, because you've faced a major setback in terms of like you thought you would be prime minister. And then you were told that no, you are not even eligible. That's a huge setback, and some people might turn away from politics, but you are doubling down on it. You're still campaigning, supporting your party. Where does that come from, the resilience? Is it just innate in you, or like when that happened in May 2023, what was your initial, you went back home and did you throw pots at the wall, or what was your reaction?
Because I knew it was a possibility. I do scenario analysis all the time. It must be the GSB side.
Yeah, that's a business.
So I always have like scenario analysis of what to expect in my life. When I'm worried or when I'm anxious, my technique is to imagine the worst case scenario and imagine what could happen. Once I have that down on paper, I stop worrying. It's really a powerful tool that you're okay. How bad can it get? And maybe I have a scenario analysis of maybe 15% ban, 15% two-term prime minister. Maybe in the median would be one term and get thrown away, or military coup happen. So it's politics of possibilities, and various things could happen. But I mentioned in a debate with a digital footprint that was asked, what happened if you win but you don't get to be a prime minister? And I answered that on TV. So it's very prevalent that I already anticipated such a scenario. And once you have that kind of proactive thinking in life, you don't take it personally.
I see.
And then once you step back and you see, like, okay, there's many political parties that get banned before me, and there's politicians who are banned for 10 years, 200 of them to be precise, 250 something, and I'm politician number 259. And you feel, okay, so this is a systematic issue. It's not a personal issue. I don't take it personally. I don't have to take this personally. It becomes a lot lighter, personally.
I see.
But professionally, it increases the density of your calling, that this is a systematic issue, that if I don't stand up for it, it's going to happen to my daughter's generation and my granddaughter's generation, because it's becoming normalized that this will, we will allow this to keep happening and over again. So you feel like, okay, my calling had become stronger. Okay, I can wait for my time, and I will come back stronger, more vigorous, and more capable and more relevant. But if I give up and let loose and don't practice my policy muscles, then when I return, I'll probably be quite irrelevant to what's going on, especially when the world is moving so fast. And Boston and Stanford is a nice place for me to keep myself up to date with what's going on around the world.
I mean, this has happened from Nelson Mandela to the current Bangladesh leader. This has happened, but just curious, out of the 250 plus people who were banned in Thailand from politics, how many of them are still involved?
No, they're ministers now.
Okay, so
some of them were banned by about 5 years. Some of them were banned with 10 years. But they're trying to get rid of me for life. So it's going to be a lifetime ban. So I also have to fight back. People are really in despair and things like that. I said, don't be despair. Look at Lula of Brazil. Look at Bangladesh. Look at Hungary. Look at South Korea. There's many good stories all around. So politics is a ball. A ball could turn either way. So if there's enough mandate, if there's enough calling from the people that they want me to govern and they want me to run again, whatever legal procedure that is done to me can be reversed. A fair and just amnesty for every people who were destroyed because of political reasons, a mechanism to destroy political opponents should be able to get their rights back, because it's a fundamental right. Political right is a fundamental right. It's not just to give an amnesty to me, but to my political opponents as well. I think that's fair. And if that's fair, it's going to be a start zero, like a start from the very beginning for Thailand. So ban me for life, then, but that can be reversed. We saw that with Lula and many leaders. Pathway to power is always there, as long as you still have that fire in you and people give you the mandate, I think.
So that's both. Would it be fair to say that if not for the support of the people of the country, the Thailand, well, there's personal fire that's burning inside you, but is it fair to say that that's what you need to
Absolutely.
keep going?
Absolutely. I mean, judicial lawfare versus lack of support. Lack of support is a heavier price to pay. You could have a judicial penalty on me, but as long as my support is still strong and people want me to lead, I think with that kind of unlimited power, anything can be reversed, anything can be changed.
Right. So you mentioned being in the middle, international, local, and age-wise, and all of that. And Thailand is kind of in the middle of the fight against the democratic backsliding in the world. And you mentioned that you have some connection to other champions of democracy in those challenged nations. Can you say a little bit more about the personal connection?
It's called Democracy in Hard Places.
Yeah.
There's a book about it, and there's programs about it, and there's projects about it where people who are trying to do the impossible, and we get together and we learn from one another, and we try to support one another where we can.
Yeah.
Both on campaign strategy, mobilization strategy, narrative building, voting turnout. All these things are very important because it's a skill that you can't really learn. I mean, leadership is like swimming. I could teach you about how to do strokes and how to breathe under the water and things like that, but if you don't get kicked into the pool, you wouldn't be able to swim. So those are the things that you have to keep practicing all the time. And learning from real leaders is 10 times than reading books. But I read a lot of books, but at the same time, to really hear how things can be reversed and how things can go as planned and things like that is very, very valuable lessons.
Any books in particular recently that you've read that really left an impression on you?
Tyranny of the Minority. And How Democracy Dies. I read a lot of fiction books as well. By Murakami is my favorite to keep me light keep me light at night before I go to bed, and short stories especially with his tie with Cambridge. There's many things about jazz in Cambridge, so when I read about it, and I feel like that's also rest is work, so that's how I unwind and keep going. So thank you to Japan.
Haruki Murakami, my favorite too. Since high school, really. I think he's coming up with a new
Ndoichi Sakamoto.
Sorry. Oh, really? No, music. Okay, good. I remember last year.
Opus, right? The movie about him.
Yeah, sure. Last year at the talk, I remember you referring to White Lotus. So, do you watch those kinds of TV
on the plane?
Oh, okay.
I did on the plane. Now, personally, we have a political documentary coming up.
Oh.
It's called Lead the Way. So you guys can check it out. It's called leadthewaymovie.com. So it's going to be a political documentary about democratic backsliding in Thailand. The producers and some of the crews worked on White Lotus.
I see.
That's a connection. So I think it's going to be a world-class level in terms of political documentary. So if you care about Thailand, you understand it better. But if you care about democracy and you want to see about democratic decay or backsliding, this documentary will be about it.
Yeah. So your life at Harvard Kennedy School, tell me a little bit more about your day-to-day operation. You would read those books about democracy, you would communicate with other democratic defenders of democracy, and what other things do you do right now?
So class, communal workshops, and private office hours. So I do a lot of private office hours for those people who has desire to run for public office. So it's not anybody who could come to the office. They have to have some sort of commitment that within 10 years after they graduate that they want to run for public office. And we sit down and we craft campaigns with them together. So once they finish the semester with me, they'll keep refining and keep coming back. Why you want to run? What do you want to represent? Who's going to be your voter? Which position would you try to do? And I give them my secret sauce pretty much. I give them my secret sauce, and they would have that campaign strategy once they graduate. Communal workshops, I call it Pad Thai and politics, because back at Harvard Institute of Politics, they have pizza and politics, where people come and join pizza and talk about politics with real politicians. So more developing countries, more Asian focus, called Pad Thai politics, where people can come and think about it as a brown bag lunch kind of thing. And then I teach how to run for public office in developing countries. I co-teach with a professor. And I think that happens during springtime. Yes.
It's a lot of mentoring. That must be variable time.
Grooming next-gen leaders.
Yeah, the next generation.
But I'm in that unique position where, because I graduated from there and I turned textbook into reality, now I can turn reality into textbook, especially in more of a Asian context, more of a developing context, rather than just the American context. And I think both Harvard and Stanford is an international institution where you have various people from various origins. So.
We need to have you more often here to mentor the younger generation here. So you've been living in the States for a couple of years by now.
2 years.
2 years. And you've watched President Trump's re-election and you framed it as the opening act of a new world order. That's already more than a year ago. What has been your observation in the last couple of years of the United States politics in its domestic and foreign policies?
Now I would call it a managed rivalry. Now I would call it competitive coexistence between America and China. There's no real hegemon coming out from both countries. There's ups and downs for both leaders. President Trump has an election to win in November, and the tariff card that he used to have is being constrained by the court, and Xi Jinping also has his own problems to deal with in terms of overcapacity in domestic economy and the digital race and things like that. So it's a managed rivalry, competitive coexistence that will keep going because they understand that a full decoupling hurt them both. Like a full decoupling was an economic suicide for both of them, so that's not going to happen. But it's a kind of issue where they have guardrails now, but guardrails without trust. That level of distrust is still very deep, and we'll have to see what happens in November and December, where they'll meet again in G20 in Miami and APEC in Shenzhen. And it's going to be quite a race between these two powers. And we'll see what happens with the midterm election in November as well. So it'll be very interesting to be in the States in the last quarter of this year.
And Thailand and Southeast Asia as a whole being situated in a geopolitically, geoeconomically very important sort of swing states.
So I think no longer peripheral, now is being very central to the current debate of the current global world order. The question is whether they understand it and they can use it as an economic optionality where they don't have to choose sides and they can work with everybody in order to determine their own future. But if they're being pushed and being asked to take sides and they did that, or they over rely or over dependency on the fight, I think that would be very disastrous for ASEAN.
So finally, I'd like to ask you to share with us some wisdom messages to especially the young generations or young at heart about the future of democracy and what they can do in Thailand, in Southeast Asia, in the world. If you could share what you tell those young people who you mentor at Harvard more broadly, that would be the...
I think always follow your heart, but take your brain with you. A lot of people, young people who come to me and they feel like they have a passion burning inside, and then they're afraid of doing it and they couldn't make up their mind. I think if they follow their heart but take their brain with them of how to get there, and I think that will make them very happy. And happy is a form of resistance. And if they keep going like that, I think they'll find the sweet spot of something that makes them relevant, happy, and better off. But if they don't know what they want and they don't know how to get there, they don't improve their skills in analysis and communication, it's going to be a very hard life for them going forward. So it's up to you whether you find your North Star, improve the skills in order to have a plan in order to get there. I think it's quite important for them to have purpose.
Great message, great note to end on. Peter, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights and experiences.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
It's an honor.
Thank you for joining us for APARC briefing. I'll see you next time.
See you.